All right, welcome everyone to this first tutorial. We're gonna cover this graph and this metric right here. The purpose of this tutorial is not yet to teach you how to apply it to your analysis. The purpose is to teach you how to interpret it. And then in the next video, we will start talking about how to actually apply it. It's a little bit more of a complicated topic. That's why I think it's good to isolate this and first see, okay, what are we actually looking at? And then how are we going to apply this? So to give you a little bit of a sneak peek, a little bit of hint, we're going to use this data to determine the likelihood of P1 holding. But how we're going to do that, don't worry about that yet. We're going to get into that in later videos. For now, what did this graph tell us? You can see that the title of the graph is percent distances from daily open to first pivot. What we're talking about there is the distance between the daily open and the first pivot. So I'll pick up, I have some prepared videos. You can see here that the distance between the daily open and the first pivot, right, P1 right here, is plus 0.46%. So what this data shows you is just a collection of all, like how far from the daily open the first pivot was put in over the last, in this case, 3 years or so, 3 or 4 years or so. And then just how far. So we can see that most often it gets put in really close to daily open, and then it's gets less and less likely to put in the P1 the further you go away from the daily open, right? So it happens more rarely that price puts in a P1 further away from daily open, which makes sense. But so this is just what it's saying. So if this is saying plus 0.46% from daily open, we put in the P1, then that one is going to be somewhere here. You have 0.4%, right? There's 53 days is what you can see, 53 days of this selection. We put in the P1 somewhere between 0.4 and 0.6% from the daily open. So that's just basically what this data is showing. Now you can see that it's kind of like a normal distribution. Normal distribution is really powerful, but we're not going to get into the pure mathematics of it, don't worry. But we can see that we have an area to the right of 0 and an area to the left of 0. What you have to see that as is that we have days where P1 was the daily low, because what we just had, if P1 is above the daily open, then obviously the distance is going to be positive because you have a plus 0.46% displacement from the daily open. But if you have the daily P1 below the daily open, then you're going to have a negative displacement, right? Then it would be negative 0.46%. So what that means is that when you're looking at this data, everything on the left of 0 represent the days where P1 was the daily low, and everything on the right represents the days where P1 was the daily high, right? So that's something we could see. We were just looking at 0.46%. We saw that it's somewhere here, right? So you can see it is on the right of 0 because we simply had that positive displacements. P1 is the daily low. So if P1 is the daily low, you're going to see it show up on the left side of this chart. And if P1 is the daily high, you're going to see it on the right side of the chart. Now, it's important to note that this chart takes an input value. The later video is going to talk about inputs because this input mode is very important. But for now, I just want to focus on something else. We have manual input and automated input. The automated input, again, will be discussed later. But for now, we have this manual input field right here. You can see that the chart will change depending on what I put in. So if I put 3%, you can see that the formatting will change. This metric will also change. We're going to dive into that later on. If I put 1%, it changes. If I put negative 1%, you can see also the formatting changes. So what exactly is happening here, right, with the formatting? It basically just shows you what is, now I have negative 1.01%. What it is marked out in red are all the days that had less than negative 1.01%, or bigger than, I should say, so negative 1% or more displacement between the daily P1 and the daily open. So in other words, in red you see all the days that had a P1 put in further away from the daily open than negative 1%, so there could be negative 2%, negative 3%, right? And what is mapped out in blue is all the days that had a P1 that were closer than negative 1% from the daily open. And then on the other side, you can see right now, everything on the right is marked in gray. And that is because we treat the positive and the negative values differently. So we've seen, you know, days where P1 was daily low and days where P1 was daily high. You often see a little bit of a difference between, you know, it doesn't mean that if a day often has, or say like 50% of the days have more displacement than 0.5% positive, then that doesn't mean that the negative displacement is also 50%. There's like a discrepancy in there. So therefore this is grayed out because it's not really taken into the calculation of this metric. And we're going to get into there now. I just first want you to understand what's being shown here and how it's being formatted. So again, if I put 2%, then we will see in red all the days that had a P1 further than 2% away from daily open, and in blue, everything that is closer than 2% from the daily open. So that is what is being presented in that graph over there. What I want to focus on next is in this metric right here. So this metric is really important. And again, we're going to focus only on the interpretation of this metric and not so much on how we're going to use it. How we're going to use it is something we're going to discuss in the next video. But we've already seen that this is being formatted based on an input value. Right now it's manually. Again, you can automate this, but we're going to cover that later on. For now, I just want to get the point across. But we see that, you know, this in red is the area that's more than 2% away. What this is showing you, the metric, is simply quantifying this area, right? So we're quantifying how many days, what percentage of days have a P1 that is 2% from the daily open or further, right? So we can see in this case that 21.7% of the, here you can see it here, percent of first pivots more than 2.1% away from the daily open is 21.7% of the days. So we can see that only 21% of the days have a distance from the daily open that is further away than 2.01%. If we do -2, we can see that 23.8% of the days have a distance from the P1, a distance from the P1 to the daily open more than -2.01% away. Now it's very important to here, and we're going to dive into some visual examples to make this more clear. But first I want to state that it's very important to understand that this calculation is based only in this case on the negative days. Again, you see the positive days are grayed out. We're not taking them into account for this calculation. So what you see here is that 23.8% of the days where P1 was the daily low had a P1 further than -2.01% away, which is obviously different than saying 23.8% of the days at -2% or +2%, right? This is just not taken into account. What is gray is not taken into account. Right, let's dive into some more visual examples to make this more clear. So for example, I prepared some things. We can see here in the graph, we have -1.07% distance from daily open to P1. You can see it right here. See, the daily open was here. P1, current P1 is right here. And we can see that there was a -1.07% displacement. What we see here is that 46.1% of days have a P1 that is -1.07% away from daily open or further. In other words, 64.1% of daily P1s are put in this zone right here. And the opposite of that, right, 100% minus 46.1% means that 53.9% of daily P1s are put in within this zone right here. And I think if you're seeing this, you can already start kind of realizing how you could use this data to determine the likelihood of a P1 holding or not. But we're going to dive into that in a later video. Once again, I just want you to understand what this is saying. So this metric and the surface area right here, you see the red surface area is just this right here, this area right here, and the blue area is this right here. So you can already see that actually, you know, a very big portion of P1s is put in a very small area. It's already something you can take away. But, you know, so this metric is nicely represented. So 46.1% of daily P1s are put in further away from daily open than the P1 right here, right? So this is kind of like a high probability zone, you could say, to put in P1. Another example, just to drive it home, we have here a P1 that is -3.66% away from the daily open. So that is a lot further. And we can see that only 5.3% of days have a P1 that far from daily open. So this is a very rare event, what we saw here, right? It happens, but it's rare. We can see that depicted nicely here. So 5.3% of daily P1s are put in further away from daily open than the distance we have here. So in this zone, and that means that 94.7% of daily P1s are put in within this zone, right? So 94.7% of daily P1s are put in within this area right here. Now, you might be wondering why we're looking at, okay, how many days are further away and how many days are closer for a P1. And we're gonna dive into that in the next video. For now, it's just really important to understand what is happening here. I think I have discussed all that I needed to discuss regarding these metrics. So yeah, just going through my notes. Yeah, we've discussed everything. So now you know what this metric is, what this graph is, and what this metric is, what it shows, how it's formatted. That it takes an input value and then gives you a number of how many days have a P1 further away than whatever input value you have. So now that you understand what is being shown in this video, or in this graph, in this metric, we're going to look at, okay, how are we going to use this? And for that, I'll see you in the next video.